Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and I'm your host, Blythe Brumleve. I am proud to welcome in Marina Mayer. She is the editor-in-chief at Food Logistics and Supply and Demand Chain Executive, co-founder of Women in Supply Chain Forum, content director of Iron Market. So she kind of does it all. And I've been wanting to have this conversation for years. We're finally able to make it happen. We're live at Manifest, the Future of Supply Chain and Logistics. So Marina, that's a hell of a resume that we just talked about.
That's a mouthful. Some days I wonder how I sleep, and then I realize I don't.
There's not a lot of sleeping, I think, going on at a conference like this. Would you agree?
I agree. No sleep.
And so I want to start off with, we'll get into the conference here in just a little bit, but I want to start off with you, your background, how you got started in supply chain and logistics. Because I always think that's just a fascinating story, and you're responsible for telling a lot of stories in supply chain and logistics. And so I want to hear your story first. So how did you get into covering this industry?
It was by accident, a happy accident, I should say. I've always been in B2B. It was what I went to college for. Well, in journalism. My first job out of college was a B2B directory publication. And I just kept moving to different companies, and I landed at a company, not the one I'm at now, but working for a food and beverage processing magazine. And this job opened up at one of the supply chain publications, and I was on maternity leave with my firstborn, my daughter. And I thought, well, what's a better time to apply than when you're on maternity leave? And so I applied, and they said, oh, we want to move you over, 2 weeks after you return, you're starting this new job. And I thought, well, okay, new baby, new job. But it's all a fog. I don't remember any of it. But it was probably the best decision I made, even though it was tiresome and emotionally distraught, because I don't imagine myself ever leaving the supply chain industry, not being able to cover it, not being able to be at shows like this and talk to people about what's going on in the world. And so I've just always stayed in here, and now I'm on my 14th year
Oh my gosh.
being in the supply chain space. So yeah, pretty exciting.
So what was the first venture that you went out and sort of, I guess, conquered? Was it the Food Logistics magazine, or how? What?
So I think my first one was something that we launched a couple of years ago. Was our Women in Supply Chain Award, and then our Women in Supply Chain Forum, because that's something that I've always been at publications, but I've never had the opportunity to do something that's mine. And so the award, I went to our brand director and said, I really think we need to create this award. We have all these other awards. I really feel passionate about this, something I really want to see get forward. I had this whole pitch. I was ready to explain it, and he was like, yes. I didn't even get to pitch it. He said yes. So we launched the award during COVID, which was another stressful. I don't know why I do things when the world is already up in arms, but and then we launched the Women in Supply Chain Forum, which is the in-person event. And it's just, I think for me, that's the highlight of my career, because it's seeing something that I feel passionate about and it coming to life and creating this community around women in logistics.
That's such an incredible story, because it is something that you own, that you're able, it's almost like your baby, I would imagine. Yeah. Or maybe not a real baby, obviously you
right,
have
but
real
children.
It's
something that I feel really passionate about and all in. But I still have the other facets of our brands and my job that I have to do. But this is if I could just do this all day, it'd be great.
So I imagine with being in charge of magazines and media and awards and events, that you have some fantastic stories that you've been able to share over the years. Do you have a couple of women in supply chain that maybe you've experienced or written that story, or you talked to them and seen them come from difficult conversations, but difficult situations maybe? Any favorites that stick out?
I have a lot of favorites. I think a lot of the women in this industry are doing a lot of wonderful things. And it's not just an award. I mean, we have people who we've had at our conference speak, and they're off doing other things. I'm not saying that what we're doing is helping them, but it's providing a platform for them to kind of grow their own network and build their own community. And that's to me is also super important. We're all in this together. I don't look at everybody as competition. We got to keep leaning on each other and building on each other. I think there's so many stories. Our first award winner, was Bindia from Resolink, and she's been on CNN, she's been on Bloomberg, she's been on, all these national TVs talking about logistics and data analytics, and like, to me, that's just, she was our first award winner. She wasn't doing that before, she's doing it now, and that's just super cool. It's just super cool. So Charlie Safro was another Women in Supply Chain winner. She was a panelist for us. She's not here at the show because she's currently doing a TED Talk. It's just amazing.
She's such an incredible person.
It's just, so these women, they're just doing impactful things. It's not like just an award for them. They're really doing impactful things.
And I think that that's where it's key, is highlighting the women that are doing these fantastic things behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because we come to conferences like this, and you've been coming to conferences for a long time. And I think I used to make a joke about how when you would show up to one of these things, the bathroom line for the women's restroom is so much shorter than the men's line. But now it's becoming a little bit longer.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed, there's 2 women's bathrooms down the hall and 1 man. So I'm pretty jazzed about that. It's a sign.
Yes. And I think Manifest, this conference in particular, is the first place where it brings like the global.
Yes.
At least for me, for the conferences I've been to, it's the first one that brings the global supply chain under one roof, which is so incredible to see, because typically we only see it from, or I've seen it from a U.S. perspective, but to see it from an international perspective is just, one step further. And I imagine with all the women that you're covering within your publications, that it's the same for that as well.
I love it. I've spent my whole day just hugging people, hugging winners, hugging people that I know through other people. I feel like I've not gotten any work done, but I don't know what that means, because they're all nurturing relationships. And so I just have come and see people, and it's like a little party. I get to see all my friends. It's cheers,
Right.
where everybody knows your name, kind of a thing.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Everybody comes, and you're just like, I know you, I love this, and let's hug, and congratulations on being an award winner. And it's not just our Women in Supply Chain. We have Pros to Know winners here. We have winners from our Top Tech Startup Awards and our Software Awards. People are just doing fantastic things for the industry.
So it's not just food. Like,
No,
I just got the impression.
Everything.
So, oh, wow.
We launched the Top Tech Startup Award 2 years ago, and a lot of our startups are here today at the show. And we've been visiting them and saying hello, and they're just doing things that make the world a better place.
And so how do you help them? Media training, exposure?
So
what does that look like?
exposure, we work with them, get them nominated, make sure that they're aware of the guidelines, make sure that they're aware of the criteria, and really promote, get yourself in the running. You got to be in it to win it, kind of a thing. I can't be the one to nominate you. It's a little biased, but I would love for you to be a part of that list. And just make sure you really tell your story. And so we have a lot of Pop Capacity is a big one here. They have a big booth. They're doing a lot of different things, and they're just doing phenomenal work.
And so from your perspective, I'm curious as to how you attack your editorial plan with all of these different publications.
Yeah.
How do you go about planning? Because we talked earlier, and I told you a little bit about how I was struggling last year with my editorial planning as far as the show is concerned, taking different strides with that this year, trying to at least. And I'm curious as to how you approach it. What does your, media planning look like? I imagine you're planning this months, maybe sometimes years in advance.
Yeah. So Q3 of every year, we plan the next year's topics. And we kind of try to stick to it as best as possible, because that's kind of like our guideline. But as you know, in supply chain, sometimes stuff happens overseas. Sometimes a canal breaks. Sometimes a bridge breaks, and you can't plan for that in your calendar. So you just kind of have to make room for those pivoting sessions that you can kind of collaborate with companies. But we do try to, when we plan out, we try to plan on all facets. We're covering software, we're covering warehousing, we're covering transportation. We got to make those availability those spots available. So there's no secret sauce. I've not mastered it by any means.
I was going to say, what about things that do come up? I don't want to say last minute, but
they do. It's hard. I'm a 2-person editorial staff on our supply chain, and we have freelance, and we do kind of get help in other areas. But when you don't have a lot of people, you kind of unfortunately have to pick and choose. And so, print deadlines are print deadlines. We can't go around that, but we do try to make opportunities available, contributed content. Hey, do you want to do a quick 10-minute interview? things like that. So I don't have it all figured out. I'm not going to pretend that I do.
Yeah, I think it's just one lesson learned the hard way. Just every now and then you just try to get a little bit better.
All these disruptions, they disrupt my plans.
Now that you say that, media and covering this industry is very similar to the people actually working in trying to cover freight.
Yeah.
It's very much like, how are you working on your sourcing? How are you working on your last mile delivery, your distribution?
I mean, it's constant. I mean, there's so many people that I've talked to today just about stuff that's going on with the Red Sea and like shipments and how costs of goods are going up, and they can't guarantee anything. And that's a hard place to be. But, internally we all understand it. Externally, consumers don't always understand that. So it's challenging.
So what does, I guess, your planning look like? So print mag, and then outside of that, because there's always going to be the debate like print versus digital, but it seems like you really combine
the two. Yeah, we figured out how to, over some time, I'm not going to say it was overnight, we have a very set in stone print to digital, digital to print strategy. Make sure that, both eyes are on both because they're not the same reader sometimes. And it's different every issue, it's different every topic, but we do try to kind of marry the two so that we have both, and then we have our newsletter, we have webinars, our awards. Those are our big part of our planning. So, yeah.
I'm curious I'm sure you do like regular analytics to try to see like what stories are popping the most. I did it for myself. It was very interesting to see the difference in the popularity of certain of content on YouTube versus content on the podcast. It's very different. I'm sure
they're two totally different users, readers. They too, and still today, the people who look at our website may not be the same people who get our newsletter, even though the newsletter comes from our website. So
that's interesting.
It's just how people want content delivered and what's easy for them.
What do you think is an area of, because marketing plays obviously a big role in what you do and getting those stories out. What would, I guess, some of the bigger things or shifts that are happening in media and marketing that you haven't jumped onto yet, but you're curious about and you maybe want to experiment in the future?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is our industry specifically is trying to figure out, now that we're all back in person, does that change their revenue and how they are spending money? Because we've had a lot of people say, I want to put all my money into my booth, and my trade shows, and my travel. And that's totally something that has never been a thing. And so we're hearing a lot of that, and it's a good thing. We like that, but it's just funny that's just a different strategy that we kind of have to look at, because look at this show. It doubled. I mean, it's crazy. It's remarkable. But this is kind of, people love the in-person. Who would have thought after COVID?
Right.
I thought people would remain hermits.
I mean, it was really fun being a hermit for a while.
It was,
and, the no traffic on the roads, and that was super nice. But now it's definitely, before we hit record, we were both kind of talking about just trying to take a breather.
Yeah.
Because of the media, for folks who may not be aware, that the media landscape and supply chain and logistics, it's a small community.
It is.
It's growing. Of course, it's grown, heavily in the last few years. But it's also a very small community, and you have a lot of companies here that are trying to get attention, that they're trying to, and the PR outreach is absolutely insane.
It's insane. And I God bless them, I love it.
In a good way.
But it's just, it's everybody is trying to get in front of others, and I appreciate that. But that's what these in-person shows are doing. I mean, there's only so much of us to go around, and there's so little time. So that's where I think it could be a little challenging.
Yeah, it's definitely, you learn, I think with Manifest, you learn a new lesson every year about what capacity you can only take on yourself. Like I joked before we started recording that the only time I can catch my breath is if I go into the bathroom and hide in a stall.
Just stand there for 5 minutes. Okay, I'm good. Have a pep talk with yourself. I've learned not to schedule anything on travel days. That was my lesson learned this one. I had stuff scheduled yesterday, and travel screwed everything up, and so I had to cancel everything. So, lesson learned. Not on travel days.
Now, what does your post-conference sort of plan look like? Are you following up with a bunch of people,
Yep.
getting stories? Like,
Yep.
what does that look like
Yeah,
for you?
we are following up. We have my managing editors out there following up for stories. She has a whole list of contacts she's going to go after and do interviews. We're trying to get speakers for our Women in Supply Chain Forum. We're just, following up just to make sure everybody's taken care of. Our award winners, we stop by. Hey, I'll email you when the next award opens, just in case you want to throw your hat in the ring again. So yeah, it's just a lot of nurturing. It's constant nurturing. You have to keep reminding people of things because they're so busy too.
Now, what does that, I guess, if I'm a PR rep or if I'm a company and I want you to cover my business, like what are some ways to get that attention? And then what are some ways that are absolutely going to turn you off?
That's a great question. Something I can very easily answer. What I love is when PR companies email me and say, I want to set up a meeting. And we have a meeting and we talk about who are your clients, what do they want from me, here's our topics, here's what we are looking for, how can we meet in the middle? Is it contributed content? Do they want to, be on a webinar? Do they want to be interviewed in an article? And then the ones that I don't appreciate are the ones that just badger you with emails and pitches and you're like, you're not understanding our business model. And I don't even know who you're talking about. They sometimes don't even put the client's name in the email. And it's constant badgering. So I would much rather form that relationship with the PR company and say, let me understand who your clients are. Let me understand who you are, how you operate. And then let's work together because we need each other. So, but there's a lot that are just, that they badger you. I'm sure you get it too. And it becomes a turnoff. At that point, I just don't have time.
Yeah, it's one of those things. We were talking about, sort of the manifest like PR outreach, and there's about 60 of us relative to like a CES, for example,
Yeah.
Consumer Electronics Show, where you have, there's probably 1,000 media members, and that might be on the conservative side of things,
Right.
going to these events. So you have all of that, I guess additional help per se,
Yeah.
or additional coverage, but we're only.
I can only meet with so many people, and I literally was like, when am I going to eat lunch? I have to eat lunch. Right. You're not going to want to meet with me at 2:00 if I have not had lunch.
Now, getting back to the Manifest show. Now, when people will be listening to this, it'll be a few weeks after the fact. So I'm sure they'll be looking forward to some of these stories that maybe you've seen out on the expo floor. You've had those conversations with. What kind of stories are you looking forward to telling in the future?
What I love at this show is not only meeting the people, but I love seeing what they're bringing and introducing. There's been a lot of new product introductions or news announcements that have happened in the past 24 hours. Acquisitions or seed funding rounds. So that shows growth. It shows progress. It shows these companies are coming here and they want to do big things for the year. And I think because Manifest is at the beginning of the year, it sets the stage for the rest of the year. And so, I think just this morning there were like 60 press releases on the Manifest website. And I looked at it and was like, oh my God, I can't handle this now. But
I just had a panic
I'll
attack.
deal with this later. But that just shows a lot of like the growth and the progress that's going on in this industry. And I don't think that that's ever been like that at this show or at any other show. It's a lot.
That's one thing that
and
that's what a Manifest team does is
Yeah.
they don't do any paid marketing, which I think is fantastic, but then on the flip side they have all of this organic marketing, and they encourage the companies that are coming to drop their news releases here at the show.
And I love it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you're going to have to, your email inbox is going to be even fuller.
I need some time next week, but
so I think that's a hit to any company that's trying to reach out to you.
Yeah.
After a conference like this, wait a few weeks. Email inbox is a little bit less cluttered, and you can kind of get your bearings a little straight.
Yeah.
What about from, I guess, the independent creator side of things, where we're seeing kind of a growth in sort of the solo independent podcasters? Yeah. I'm a beneficiary of that,
Right.
That growth in that medium. What kind of advice would you give to other people who may be covering content within their own organization, maybe looking for a little bit of help with, exposure to that content from your organizations? What kind of advice would you give to them to, make better marketing internally so that they can drive up more business and be able to afford, the paid opportunities?
That's a good question. I think kind of what you touched on earlier, like creating that agenda, creating that schedule and figuring out what you want to be and who you want to talk to and what kind of topics you want to cover. You can't probably cover everything, but you also don't want to be too niche. So it's trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, kind of as a with that podcast. And I think, forming relationships with other media outlets who can kind of help you. Because we have a podcast, we don't use it. So I appreciate being on others for that reason, because we have that in common, and we can lean on each other and support each other in ways where you're more skilled in some areas than us and vice versa. So I think it just, collaborate. Collaboration is key.
I love that. And for most of the guests, if I remember this time, I have a set of questions that I like to ask each guest. So I would love to be able to ask you a few of these. They're marketing related questions.
Okay.
So how do you think about marketing when it comes to you and your company?
Well, we have an internal marketing department, and I love having an internal marketing department. I love having a group of people where I'm like, here, take care of this for me. But they handle all of our booth stuff for shows. They handle all of our collateral that we pass out at shows. They handle all the behind the scenes. I know not every company is as blessed to have that. We do. We probably have a 6-person marketing team, which is almost unheard of.
Oh, awesome.
But they are fantastic. And so anybody out there who does not, please try to get that.
Okay, what about your favorite social media platform and why?
LinkedIn. I have met and connected with so many people on LinkedIn. And that platform has provided outreach for me to grow our forum, to grow awards, to connect with people like you who I had never met in person. And then you see them walking down the hallway and they're like, I think I know that person, but I don't remember how.
Yeah, you have to match their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, and then you're kind of like, wait, you don't look nothing like your LinkedIn profile. But I think LinkedIn is just a phenomenal platform.
Do you have a second favorite?
I like Facebook, but more for personal reasons. But yeah, LinkedIn all the way.
Okay, what is your favorite SaaS tool that you can't live without?
Do Google Docs count?
Yes. That's actually, I have a Google Doc open right now.
I cannot live without Google Docs. I even have Google Docs I share with my family for stuff because I just love it that much. And that's how we plan for events. It's how we coordinate our schedules and who's doing what and who's going where. And just everything goes in there. It's all hands on deck.
Okay, favorite freight business that isn't your own?
Well, anybody who's delivering my packages every other day, I'm all for.
Shout out to Amazon Delivery.
Shout out to those guys who my dogs cannot handle.
All right, what is a book or podcast that has changed your perspective on something?
Ooh. Well, I'm an avid reader. I read a lot of books, but I read mysteries, murder mysteries, books that have nothing to do with supply chain. And I probably don't want to say a lot of them because people are going to be like, wow, that's really bad.
Well, it is true crime is like the 1 podcast by a mile for women.
I'm here for all of that because who doesn't love a good whodunit,
Right. All right. And last one. Now, you've covered a lot of stories, so I'm sure maybe, it might take a minute to think of one, but what is your favorite supply chain or logistics fact?
What was that again?
What's your favorite supply chain or logistics fact?
Well, I think the fact that women in supply chain is growing is a very good fact.
Heck yeah.
We're not there yet, but studies have shown I think Gartner said it was like 23%.
Oh, wow.
Up from like 15%.
Wow.
And even the number of women executives is growing. Maybe that was the number it is.
Heck
I'd
yeah.
have to double check my website to see what I wrote.
But still, that's almost double-digit growth.
Yeah,
in
and that's a good fact because it's just showing that we're all doing our part. Every company that's here is doing their part. I know there's a women's lunch tomorrow that we partner with Manifest on. And are a sponsor of, and it's just, I think that's so important.
And so, as we kind of round out the conversation, where can folks, maybe submit themselves, women submit themselves to your awards, to your publications, if any businesses are listening and they maybe want to pitch you in the right way a few weeks after conferences, where can folks follow you, follow more of your work?
So they can follow me on LinkedIn. You can go to our website, we have foodlogistics.com and then stcexec.com, or you can just email me. You can find my email.
Heck yeah, we'll put this all in the show notes too, make it easy for
and just
people.
reach out and just let's form that relationship. Let's start having that conversation.
Marina, I'm glad we finally made this happen.
Thank you. I'm so glad. This was
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the audience will appreciate it and all the work that you're doing within the industry promoting women
thank
in
you.
logistics. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope people, and well, we're gonna respond to all of you when we get back home and our email inboxes are not overloaded. So appreciate
Exactly.
your time.